was based on the old fair stipend rule, which was mysteriously repealed. And I'm not really sure how.
Yeah, I think we were pretty good with that, and we did have the testimony come in. Mike?
I have, I'm helped by my circles in this paper document.
Oh, good, okay.
We had just been asking about the citing to the, I'm on page 4, line 2. Citing to the statute that has been repealed, and whether there's a better way to create the allowance for the one fair that doesn't meet the requirements to continue to receive its funding without citing to this repealed statute.
The Guilford Fair was that?
Farmville.
The 2-day fair is Guilford, you know.
Which was actually based, I think, Mike, you were the first one to sort of bring up the fact that.
Yeah, I think referencing a repealed statute as somehow being binding is not a great way to go.
Okay.
So I think you can say, and I don't know the 2-day, what's the 2-day issue?
So one of the requirements
Right.
to receive this funding is that the fair is run for 3 days.
Right.
There's one fair, Guilford Fair, that
Okay,
has historically received this funding, and the thought is that we would like for them to continue to qualify.
okay. So one of the things I would recommend on addressing that issue is I would put a session law section in, probably section 2. It would say transition and implementation. And it would say that the Guilford Fair as eligible previously, previous, agricultural fair stipend criteria remains eligible under this chapter, notwithstanding the fact that it is only open for 2 days.
I think we had one conversation about, and now I'm really trying to use my powers of recollection, about broadening it to maybe just allow any fair that had previously qualified to qualify again, which would sort of create an allowance that if a fair dropped out for a year for any reason, they might have the farm show, yeah, they might have the potential to come back and get this one.
Right, and strictly speaking, the farm shop might have trouble jumping through this hoop, yeah.
Yeah.
Have to sit out a year before.
Right.
Going again.
So I can do that. It's basically a session law that it'll say that those that had qualified previously still continue to qualify, notwithstanding the requirements of the chapter.
May also affect the Franklin Fair if they
Right.
dispossess season.
Right.
And haven't come up with an alternative location.
Yeah. John?
Mike, what happens in this sort of case where there's a reference to something that's not in statute anymore? Archival green books?
You can do that. Sometimes courts aren't bound by doing that. The court's first goal is to affect the intent of the legislature. But sometimes they will go to that old law and say that doesn't affect the intent of the legislature. And so then they go and look at other sources of legislative intent. We really try to avoid that. It happens though. Especially when we cross-reference federal law and the federal law gets repealed and nobody realizes that until years later. Where should I go to now?
Okay, so I think that's the first 7 pages are on our section 1, so I think we can fast forward unless anybody remembers anything else or wants to make any. Okay, so meat processing.
This is where an and needs to be an or. And that is, I believe it's page 7, line 12.
Yep. 20 or more.
Or after it says processing space, it should say or 20 or more.
Yeah,
So, just thinking of the fair one, just quickly, if a new fair wants to set up the 2-day fair, they would have to somehow apply to the agency to either have a waiver, change statute, or just have no money until they, like, the 2-day fair, they don't qualify anyway, right? So,
yeah, so, well, the case of a new 3-day fair, so that
Right.
meets that requirement, wouldn't qualify in its first year.
right,
Going forward,
second year they would. if
would
they-
qualify, yeah,
But if somebody says, look at Guilford, they're getting special case
right,
money.
yeah. They would, somebody with a 2-day, who wanted to start a 2-day fair, they would not, I think, the way we've currently,
Right, the way that it'll be set up, the way that I think you do that transition and grandfathering in those is you said an agricultural fair association that previously received assistance under the ag fair stipend will continue to receive assistance under the chapter regardless of, or notwithstanding their inability to meet the eligibility requirements of the acts.
Will continue to qualify.
Right, right.
okay. All right, so then back to section 2 here, the meat processing, we had that one little change for clarification. Anything else that anybody wants to bring up here?
What was this section doing?
What's that?
What was it doing, this section?
It's a terminology change. The term processing is really what is the appropriate term, but the language, which is old language, says cutting operations. So that's the change.
So, yeah, you can see the strikes there, and that's the only change that was brought to us. And the agency did agree that it was Representative Rice who flagged it, that we should change that one word.
The and or.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Moving on.
yeah,
So the next is the weights and measures. The language is on page 8, lines 11 through 14. They shall not issue a weighing and measuring device unless the device has been inspected and approved by the agency in 12 days of the date of application or within a longer period, 12 months of the date of the application, or within a longer period as the agency deems appropriate for the specific device at issue. So there are some devices that they're either inspected by the person, the business that provides the device, like a truck weight. Like who they rent or lease that from will come and inspect it. But there's also equipment that doesn't need an annual inspection because of the nature of the equipment. So the agency will be able to designate certain types of devices that don't need an annual inspection
under this.
under this new authority.
Right.
But I got it noted down that, I don't know if it was the committee's suggestion or agencies, but that none should go longer than 24 months.
What was that?
So where it says, or within a longer period determined by the appropriate
Right.
device, but not longer than 24 months.
Oh, okay. That's up to you.
That was a staffing problem and just, it's a very,
I had wrote it down, so I don't know.
Yeah, no, they
if
were-
it was the agency's idea or our idea.
they were over that.
I
Wasn't
don't,
mine, yours.
yeah, I don't have that note, and I don't remember that. I did make a note that,
Rodney, what day was that? Do you have a date on that? That you have your note? What day did you have your note on? I'm trying to go back through my notes to,
What do we tell the agency was in here talking?
well, they were in here a couple of days. I'm trying to just get to know.
I did make a note that Mark Fiquette who came in, so they
Right.
were in a couple times and then
The
Mark.
second, he was the last.
Yeah, from Weights and Measures, and he indicated, I think, that 973, VSA 973 already gives them some flexibility, so that we weren't really going off the deep end here, but
That is true. They do have some discretion.
so I don't know about the 24 months and whether anybody else has either note or recollection.
Just ask the agency.
Yeah, I think maybe we can put it, maybe let's flag that and then we could double check with them, see if they,
Okay.
yeah.
So moving on then. Section 4 repeals the chapter on livestock brands.
So now we're on page 9, or I'm sorry, just
Yep.
Bottom.
page 8.
What was that, Mike?
So there's a chapter in law about how you brand your animals and what that means.
Oh.
But with the movement
Oh, right.
to ear tagging and RFID, you don't really, it's not really practiced anymore. And so they just propose repealing it.
And it's, big federal law makes it redundant, possibly.
The federal requirements for animal ID don't deal with branding. It's moving away from branding. And there are federal requirements. Well, there are federal requirements for branding, but the feds are moving away from branding. So you if you're gonna say bring in a branded animal from Montana, where it's still a practice, and then you attach an RFID, you know, you have to comply with that federal law on the transport of that animal under the brand and the attachment of the RFID. So,
So it doesn't ban the practice of brand.
No, I mean,
It
if
just says we're not gonna use it as an
if you
ID.
wanted to do it, you could do it. You know, I would just not do it in the sight of the public that doesn't understand animal husbandry practices. Right? And so,
That Montana cow is grandfathered.
right, so. I mean, if you've ever seen it done, it's not supposed to be traumatic to the animal, but it can look that way.
You're burning.
Is it?
You're burning it.
So, and we're talking about repealing it here, that's what we're doing, yeah. Jeff?
I have gotten a number of horses that were freeze branded. And that's not burning, but they, like Casa Roma, they came in from the Dominican Republic. They had white CR in the number, and American thoroughbreds are also tattooed in your inner lip. The number.
Should I move
I
on?
think we can move down, yeah.
Now you're moving into section 5. This is the beginning of the multiple amendments to the B statutes. A lot of these are gender changes, gender conformity with our language requirements. But there are specific substantive requirements such as on page 9, line 14 to 18, eliminating the provision of information, whether the location of the apiary will change within 2 weeks of the date that the report is submitted.
And I think the testimony of the agency here was that this language wasn't needed.
Should I move on?
Yeah, I don't think we had an issue with that, so next page.
Next page is line 2. There's another section later on in the bill that eliminates the ability of a person to move their colony, their hive and equipment outside the state, a limited distance and for a limited duration, and not have to get that certification of health for the colony and equipment prior to moving back into Vermont. So the agency is proposing that. It's under 3032C. And this is just because it's no longer an exception, it will be struck.
So the impact of striking this exception means that if you're transporting into the state, period, you have to comply.
Yep.
So it's tightening up, tightening up.
Well, because there's no exception anymore about whether the owner transported into the state any colonies or used equipment, you don't need the reference to that
Okay, oh, yeah, okay.
obsolete.
Done.
What was the distance? It's like local food.
It was, were transported not more than 75 miles from the registered location of the owner of the bees or colonies, and then are imported back into the state within 30 days. This was something that Terry Norris really wanted because of the apiary business that would send their bees into New York. I don't think the agency really liked it from the get-go.
Okay, so let's keep going here and we'll,
Okay.
that,
Section 6, this is really just bringing the language into conformance with the legislature's gender language.
okay,
Section 7 is a little bit of that. It's actually, it's basically the same gender language conformity. Section 8, same. Section 9, same. Section 10, there is gender conformity language, but there's also a 45-day requirement. So a person engaged in the rearing of bees for sale shall have the person's apiaries inspected by the secretary then 45 days prior to any sale instead of at least once each summer season.
I think we were good with that.
Okay, moving on from there, section 11. Oh, this is all just conforming technical changes. The biggest one being we no longer use the phrase "so long as." It's provided that, and then there are gender conformity changes.
So anytime there's a bill that's being worked on,
The agency actually proposed these changes. I think the agency, but if when we're working through a statute and we see this, our editors are required to change the language. Sometimes I don't agree with their rules, like, for instance, it's not a gender one, it's if it says no more than 10 days, they say it has to be not more than 10 days. And I don't agree with that. And then they will not split an infinitive, which drives me bonkers.
not splitting.
Yeah. And so that all that kind of stuff, you all don't even see it. It just gets
You
done.
don't want to know about that.
Right.
Or the sausage, yeah.
But the agencies they proposed it. This is their proposal.
Okay. Okay.
Section 12, again, gender language conformity. Section 13, this is the first change on line 10. You're eliminating a reference to subsection D because that's the export import exception that's being repealed. So you,
that we looked at
Right.
or talked about a moment ago.
and you'll see that specific language being repealed here on page 15, line 4 through 11. So no import permit or valid certificate of inspection for bees, use equipment, or colonies is under current law is required if the colonies are registered in Vermont or transported not more than 75 miles from the registered location and are imported back into the state within 30 days of the date of original transport.
Questions? Good?
Okay, the next is section 14. That was just a gender conformity change. Section 15. This one has they wanted to change from the use of the term hives to the use of the term colony. And the colony is a broader term. It includes equipment. So I think that is what they're looking for. But that is this major substantive change here in section 15.
I think the first time the agency came in, they addressed that, and hive is the actual structure,
Right.
that, yeah,
Colonies includes
the box.
the livestock.
So that's,
Okay,
yeah, John?
Mike, is there a requirement that colonies in the state get inspected?
they do. You just looked at it. They're supposed to, before any sale, 40,
That triggers it.
Yeah.
so-
yeah.
But ordinarily, if I have
Well,
100
what
colonies,
you also need to do is report every year and provide a bunch of information that's not listed in this bill. And then they can do inspections based on that.
or like how many colonies you have or production records or
It's things like that. It's also if you've had Varroa, or any colony collapse, anything like that.
Is that connected to the insurance too, the federal insurance, if you had colonies die, right? We heard that.
No, I think it's more the agency's due diligence and oversight and administration of the program. Because there is such concern about colony collapse disorder and tracking the causes of it, they really like to get this information in order to know what's going on, specifically regionally and otherwise.
That was, I mean, it's interesting, last year it came up that, you know, that on, I think it was neonicotinoids, but, and like to say, but if you are big apiarist and you have hives lost in winter, there's actually a federal program that will reimburse you for lost hives.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Jed.
I have a question. Do apiary operators or beekeepers have the skill to test for disease or infection, or they just observe there's a decline?
Definitely, some of them do. If you haven't met Chas Mraz and his magical bees, then I mean, Chad and some of the other honey makers are really, really invested in managing their colonies and are very good at identification.
Yeah.
So does the agency perform spot checks, or is it entirely?
They can do inspections.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's move on then to
Page 17, section 16. This is the definition change for soil amendment. Soil amendment definition was just put into law a couple of years ago. There's some changes being offered to more specifically address what's going on with these products. I thought they wanted it for vermiculite, but then I heard that this is also about hydroponics.
Yeah, that seems to be where it was coming from. And it gives so what we're essentially doing here is extending whatever regulation protection is currently applies to soil amendments, to anything you would use to amend the hydroponic.
Media for growing the crop. Yeah.
John?
So what would some examples of not hydroponic side, but just soil amendments be when it says, they're not this, and this?
So if they're, I have to think about it, because back when we did this, there were two different categories of products. And one was the kind of product that you would add that's not a fertilizer, but it enhances the fertilizer. And then there's these products, which are more typical, like compost, et cetera, vermiculite. So I'd have to get back to you on that, John. I'm not clearly distinguishing between the two categories from my memory. Because we literally had containers of it. But I don't remember.
And it goes back because they had to re-register or pay a registration fee in Vermont, right?
They have to register.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
David, under line 9, when it says all the things that are not soil amendments, they talk about a compost product from a facility under the jurisdiction of the Agency of Natural Resources, Solid Waste Management rules or exceptional quality. A biosolids shall not be regulated as a soil amendment. Does that mean that's what they accept as proper soil amendments?
So no, this is kind of a byproduct of the compost wars. So when it was determined that A&R was going to have jurisdiction over facilities that just produce compost, and including wastewater treatment facilities, because they do produce a product that can be then land applied. So those facilities remained under A&R's jurisdiction and are not under the Agency of Ag's jurisdiction. So compost produced under those are not a soil amendment regulated by the Agency of Agriculture. An exceptional quality biosolid is a standard set by the federal government and Vermont for when you can take things like septage and sewage and manage it so that it can be land applied and used kind of like a fertilizer.
With PFOS and PFAS,
That's
all changing very
all
rapidly.
changing. So that's still in flux.
So, Heather?
Oh, I'm sorry, you feel free to go.
No,
I guess I have no idea what this one is supposed to do.
I agree.
Could you just lay it out for me one more time?
So the state regulates soil amendments, fertilizers, lime, other materials like that. And they require those manufacturers of those materials to annually register their products with the state. And it was determined that there were some products that kind of fit outside this definition, because you'll see on page 17, it's intended to improve the physical, biological, other characteristics of the soil. But there are some growing media that isn't soil, namely hydroponics, and they wanted those products intended for hydroponics to have to register so that the agency does a consumer protection provision as well. They make sure that the products are what they say they are. So this is adding those types of substance mixtures that are intended to improve the physical, chemical, biological, or other characteristics of the soil or a distinct form of horticultural growing media used in lieu of soil.
Okay, so the focus really is on hydroponics and not to get additional money from, say, folks who are doing biochar or peat or,
They could be soil amendments.
okay,
But they're not growing media.
Peat is a growing media.
It's biochar.
Biochar might be I mean, Yeah.
Soil.
yeah.
So right now, it doesn't say hydroponics, it's expanding the range of growing media that would be covered from just soil to more than that.
Others used for
Yeah.
horticultural growing.
So in theory, it could include peat then.
Or vermiculite or biochar. I've never seen anything grow in biochar.
It's used,
It is?
yes,
I've seen people feed it to animals.
that too, but it's more likely to be used in soil amendments.
And so, and this is simply saying, if you're purchasing or if you're using a soil amendment in whatever media, you don't get, you have to follow the same rules as if you're using it in soil. Is that a fair
Yes,
summary?
that's correct.
But to go on, so this is actually to further regulate, not, right? I mean, we're talking about widening the perspective of what we focus on.
What is registered and what is subject to the agency's Consumer Protection Authority, yeah.
Okay,
Because they want to know that what is warned or labeled on the product is correct. You know, whether it has the material, the ingredients in it that it says it does. So they will do enforcement of that. And they have authority to go into the places where this stuff is produced or distributed and do testing.
Okay, John?
And there's a commercial element to this too. It has to be something for sale, like, it's interesting, like water itself seems like it would be a soil amendment.
Yeah, it's when it's used or distributed in the state. Sold, used, or distributed.
And you referenced earlier, like, there's a Wisconsin company that's selling essentially waste treatment.
Right, you can do that too. They would have-
That last line there is talking
Right.
about that.
That's regulated by the Agency of Natural Resources because that's the authority that you kind of made in the compost war is the distinction.
But it says unless marketed and distributed, right?
Right.
Okay, good. But you have the hard stop at 11?
Not particularly yet, but I do need to be able to get down to my office and prepare for my next meeting.
Okay. All right. Why don't we move on to,
So
yeah,
page 17, line 15. This is whether or not a nursery dealer is going to be someone who sells, installs, or distributes nursery stock for commercial gain.
we had several conversations about this. I think ended up feeling comfortable with the addition of the word installs.
Okay. So then you get to the nursery license requirement. This is gender conformity, I believe, in section 17. Yep. And then section 18, there are some changes on page 19, line 12. The ability when they issue the order to destroy product. Any order to destroy or place plants on stop sale may be made verbally and shall be issued in writing within 7 days or as soon as practicable. And then the written order shall include the reason for action, a description of the nursery stock affected, instructions to separate and tag, and a reference to the appeal rights.
Done.
Is there a definition of install?
I don't know, there is not, to my knowledge.
I didn't know if that was a term used.
I think this is a whole new, there's no prior business that's been regulated just because they're installation. If you wanted to have a definition, I could work on that.
I can see, and it's something, about it, like a giant pot. That's,
Right. Okay. So I think you are on page 20, lines 5 and 6. This is pest survey detection. This is similar to, this is giving them, or clarifying their stop sale order authority. Orders, including stop sale orders, shall be in writing, includes the reason for action, a description of the plant pest, plants, parts, or et cetera. Any instructions to separate, any recommended treatment, and appeal rights. And stop sale tags shall not be removed without the secretary's written permission or written determination for suitable disposal. And then the last one is does the nursery dealer get compensated by the state for the destruction of those plants, subject to an order because of pest or plant diseases? This repeals that.
We flagged, or the agency flagged, the challenges of having, or maybe it was you who flagged it, when you walked it for the first time, having the two parties agree on price and forcing that into statute. Okay, good. Any questions here? Done.
The agency can insist on destroying something, but they just don't have to offer compensation.
That's correct. So, you import stock that has, the ash borer in it or woolly agelid, they can order it to be destroyed. And
Are invasives in another statute? I have a nursery selling Norway maples, can those be destroyed?
Oh, because can the Norway maple be destroyed? I don't think that qualifies as a plant pest.
Right, that's why I'm wondering if invasive species also in another part of statute come under this.
There's a list of it's toxic weeds and plants that aren't allowed to be sold or distributed in the state. So I don't know if Norway maple was on there.
I think it might be.
It's invasive, yeah.
I think we heard from the agency that there is some USDA funding available for situations that would have been covered here, in addition to whatever insurance the owner might have. So my recollection at the time anyways, we were comfortable with this language.
Should I stop the share?
Anybody need to go back and look at anything? All right, I think we can stop screen sharing. Thank you for multitasking there. John?
Is there any reason to hang on to this bill if we wanted to add a couple sections?
We don't, we don't have a whole lot of time just because of crossover, which is coming up rather than later.
Right.
So, we, but no, there's no reason to push it out today, for example, or tomorrow, talk about that.
I will note that this bill probably needs to go to Ways and Means and to appropriations.
Okay,
Remember, the hydroponic, you're adding a new product to what's going to be assessed a fee. And often the clerk and the secretary sends that to Ways and Means because it will generate revenue.
Yeah.
And then you have the Ag Fairs section, which is a funding program,
Right.
and that'll go to appropriations.
great. Probably neither committee needs a week or half a week even, but.
No, this is the kind of bill that they do like in a day.
Okay. So are you clear on everything that we asked
Yep.
you to do? Was there anything that was committee still needed to think about? Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, great.
All right, well, unless anybody has more thoughts on this, take a break. When we come back, we had the agenda as posted earlier today had time for talking more about the current use proposal. With Mike, there was a cross up, I think, there in his availability, so we've taken that off and substituted budget conversation there because we need to have that, and I don't know for sure what this afternoon is going to look like. And figure if that's something we want to do today. So let's take a break, come back, and we will talk a little bit more about our budget recommendation.
Is Mike coming back after the floor?
Mike is, yeah.
Okay.
Back after the.